So let's get going. First force, failure by executives to execute their well-formulated strategy. And to verify that this is an issue, here is a survey of chief executives, and notice the number one concern at the top is executing the strategy. The solution for this is what are called, as many of you are familiar with, the balanced scorecard, but also the strategy map. But above those instruments is something more important. It's the vision and mission of the executives. And that's really their job, in my mind, which is to formulate the strategy. To me, the executives answer one question: where do we want to go? But the strategy map and the scorecard and all of these other methodologies in performance management, they answer a very different question. They answer the question, how will we get there? This is much more about execution. In fact, I argue with consultants that strategy formulation should be left out of performance management. That is for McKinsey, Booz Allen, Bain, and the intelligent managers at the top, the executives at the top. This is about making it happen. Now, what's interesting is the scorecard book has been out 10 years, and roughly 75% of companies claim they have a balanced scorecard. But there is very little consensus about what a balanced scorecard is. But what bothers me more is very few organizations have the strategy map that is the companion to the balanced scorecard. And this may surprise you, but I think the strategy map is 10 to 20 times more important than the balanced scorecard. The scorecard is just a feedback mechanism. The intelligence is in the strategy map. One of the reasons I think that organizations fail to implement strategy is most managers and employees do not know what the strategy is. I mean, for example, again, if I walked into your organization and just quickly interviewed 15 employees in the hallway and said, quick, can you explain your executive's strategy to me? How many of the 15 could do it? Yeah, huge. Probably none. Well, what's the consequences? Well, if managers and employees do not know what the strategy is, then how do we expect them to know what they do each week, each month, contributes to the strategy? And that's a big part of performance management. It's not just about KPIs. It's about communicating strategy to managers and employees in a way that they can understand it. The strategy map and the scorecard are mechanical. They're like these gears in this machine, but they are an important gear. And if you know engineering, it's a gear with a lot of torque, the one that can really pull all the other gears together. Now, this is a brief seminar, not a 2-day workshop, so I can't go into detail, but this is a generic description of a strategy map. And what Kaplan and Norton realized at the top is most executives were overreacting to financial results reported at the end of the period. They said, you need to shift your thinking to the non-financial measures collected during the period so you can make responses to them. And they created this, if you will, framework that has linkages with a sequence. Each of these rectangles represents a strategic objective, projects, processes, measures, and so forth. And their idea is it really begins with employees and people learning, growth, innovation. And if you're accomplishing these objectives, they'll contribute to the improvement of internal business processes. And if those objectives are also being accomplished, they'll contribute to the customer loyalty and customer satisfaction objectives. So like a force field in physics and a magnetism, you're aligning the behavior and the priorities of all the employees with the end result, the financial results. I always say maximizing shareholder wealth is not a goal. It's a result. It's a result of doing all of these things. Now, this is a picture of a generic strategy map. They typically have 10 to 15 strategic objectives, and they're connected with cause and effect. So to summarize, a learning environment will stimulate process excellence. Process excellence will then lead to customer intimacy. and then the customer intimacy will create the financial value. So we have this, if you will, visual way of understanding the strategy. In fact, I would argue there is no strategy. There is a collection of strategic objectives that when they are, if you will, harmonize, the end result is where you want to go. Now, in each of these boxes are really 5 components that are these columns: the objective, the projects, the measure, the target for the measure, and the actual. And what this diagram shows is who is responsible for which, the executive team or the managers and the employees. Now, clearly, the strategic objectives must come from the executives. As I mentioned, that's their #1 job. Secondarily, it's to maybe grow and hire employees and make them stronger, but primarily define the objectives. But you notice this is where there tends to be a change in thinking. The second step is, what are the few and manageable projects that can be accomplished, or in some cases, the core process we must get better at. And you'll notice, rather than the executives also doing that, that should be delegated to the managers and the employees. The reason for this is involvement is important. These managers will eventually be held accountable for these things as we delegate more. We need to get them involved. Now, the sad part is most organizations don't do these first 2 steps. They start right there in the 3rd step. The executive read Kaplan's book. He said, I want a balanced scorecard. You hire a consulting firm, Deloitte, Accenture. I want a scorecard. They come in. You have lots of measures. Here are some that look like they're more important. There's your scorecard. You ask them, are those the measures you can measure or the measures you should measure? How do you know those measures reflect the strategic intent of the executive team? Then they hunch their shoulders. In this sequence, the managers should also select what are the 2, 3, or 4, that's it, maximum, KPIs that will reflect the project or the process improvement. Now, the rest is pretty quick. The target is back to the executives, because that's a psychological piece. Do we set stretch goals or just last year's averages? And then the last one, actually, I should put a new row here, say that it's the computer, because the actual results typically reside now somewhere in a computer. And to my colleagues in SAS, this is one reason why Dr. Goodnight has developed strategy map and scorecard software, because our core competency is extracting data from disparate data sources and bringing it together. So when the managers are done, clearly, like volleyball or tennis, they can be reviewed by the executives to be adjusted and refined. But why is the shift in thinking so adamant that the managers and employees will be involved? Well, only if they are can we be assured that they will understand the strategy. And that solves the problem that you laughed about 15 employees in the hallway not knowing the strategy. They have to know it because they were involved in selection.